tangible, and that depend on us, our goals. And our goals drive us to the objectives, the purposes that we are searching for. This is quite important because I'll give you an example. There is no commercial director that will tell that he will increase income in 15%. That's not depending on him. It has to do with distribution, with economical situation and context. It depends on a lot of things. This is an objective, not an individual goal. You see, so this difference is very relevant. So we can have an understanding and a specific things of our everyday life. Regarding goals, I hope that you can learn some concepts that are not well disseminated. There is not enough structured literature about these things. Universities are not teaching this. And the vocabulary also, I hope that you can have a better understanding of a logistics chain and of a logistics services network. Everyone hears about logistic chains, but to me, a logistic chain, as we know today, is something that is has a steady flow, a stable flow. That's not what is really important. I will go through also in order to give you the holistic dimension of on what consists this logistics concept. I hope that you are a little bit frightened by the dimension of the problem, but I would like to finish, and I hope to finish convincing you that we are working on this very complicated thing, and we have plans of solutions that will be here. And the future is built, so we are building it. We are building this future, and it's a change for many of us and for many of our organizations, because in the future, in 20 years, logistics won't be exactly the same as they are today. This is an absolute truth. So thus, we need to have an idea of that future, and we do, and we are working to build that future. It's extremely important, this aspect. It's not only problems, it's not only a matter of complexity. This complexity is being structured together with solutions in order to be able to reach to shore. And in the end, I will also work with you a little bit on what's going to be your evaluation on this theme, with a little challenge that I will send to you, followed by some debate regarding that same challenge. I do know that we have a tight schedule. There is an intention of being here around 6:30, I believe. Let's not forget that we have our colleagues online that have a different time zone, and we'll see how we will manage. I'd like to be interactive, and I like the concept, but we can have some problems there, so let's constrain ourselves a little bit. So let's start our agenda. I have structured this in 4 points only. The first point regarding concepts, to give you some concepts. On the second point, some trends. Factor of logistics, ports. Then the logistics single window, and exactly what it is, we need to be prudent because these are words, and words are subject to interpretation. So even on a national level, there are different interpretations on what is the logistics single window. It's not a drama, of course, but we should avoid noise with its distinct interpretations. And finally, I will give you just a little hint on the ecosystem of solutions that we are working on. It's on the pilot stage. Put all these ideas on the terrain and working and projects that interact in this area. Turning concepts, and this part of my presentation, I'll explain why later, but we'll see that logistics itself, it's an economic activity, and so it generates value. And it brings value to whom? For the clients of logistics services that typically, and in this session, the client of logistics services is someone who's in the commerce. It's an exporter that sells to some buyer somewhere in the world. So it's a trade in which, in fact, we face a problem between the seller and the buyer. We have space. We have a distance. And if we do have a distance, we need to go through it with what? With logistics. And by doing so, in most cases, goes onto the field and the terrain through a forwarder agent. And that agent has a role, and that role is of an integrator of logistics services. This role of an integrator is associated to the forwarder function. It's a navigation agent, if it's a line, if it's a group of ship owners, if it's a P3 or a P2, is the one who has that role of integrator of logistics services. When we have this role on the terrain, we can define it on the ship owner, on a forwarder, on a shipping agent, even on a freelancer, as long as it's for governance of the government, that freelancer can develop that activity. In some spaces it can, in others it doesn't. In Germany it's trickier because you need a very high insurance to cover risks. It's one of the big problems that we have in Europe still. The framework is not the same in the everywhere in the world. So, in fact, the exporter there, company A, seller, the one who sells, the vendor of the product, a suggestion for any product. Let's focus on a product. Transactionable assets. Cork, for example. Amorim Irmãos or Corticeira Amorim. Okay, cork. Cork, right? Our Portuguese cork, we are the main world producer of cork, so that's a good example. The Amorim Group, not that interesting because they have a logistics sector within, they incorporate that logistic function, which is Corticeira Amorim Indústria. But let's follow the idea that they are ignorant within logistics. And what do they see when they look down? This is a problem. That to sell to the seller B, buyer B, they need to acquire logistics service. First thing, they don't have quick access to business proposal. What can he do? He sells exports outside of the factory, at the exit of the factory. And so all the logistic kicks off the problem for the buyer. What does he want? Well, the buyer wants the product at his home. He doesn't care how you will get cork from Portugal to Sri Lanka. It's a problem for him. And so, what will he do? He will buy to someone who delivers a product to its store, to their door, because this incorporates logistics in its price. And please notice that while this or that have no price, the business won't go forward. Be concluded. I call your attention for this because later I will show you this in a summary. But, good rigor, if the seller, Cortesera Amorim, cork producers, sells the buyer in Sri Lanka GDP with everything paid, even the rates and fees at the destiny, what's happening here? First of all, satisfaction of the buyer, no work at all. The effect is the price, and the product just showed up at the storage, going to the shelf and to be sold. So vendor completely satisfied the buyer because it made a withdrawal of the complexity of the business. Second thing that's very important also, because this first one is important on the private interest perspective from the buyer and from the seller, because it was an attractive offer, and so that business in the future will reproduce itself. There is a public interest also. If that reproduction exists, there is a public interest for the economy of the country of the seller. And there is another public interest here that's very interesting. If the seller sells to the buyer, incorporating logistics, instead of, let's put it like this, instead of invoicing 100, it's 170 or 220. What does this mean? It means that the GDP the seller's country will benefit the gross domestic will increase, right? There are some expectations. They are not rigorous enough. It's within an intangible feeling, but it tells us that it's very easy if solutions that can index this problem, if they are executed on the terrain, on the field, it's very easy to increase the national GDP, to increase it in about 28 to 30% on average. Even better, improving the competitiveness of the exporter, and so empowering an increase of the business, a reproduction of a future business even. This is very important. It's very important not only on the private interest part, but also on public interest. But we face a first problem here. Those people there, when they look down, they see this gentleman here. It's the one that brings logistics available by account of one or the other or both, if they divide this thing differently. This gentleman here, that in fact is the integrator that answers above, the price can be too high with conditions that are unsatisfactory, not giving assurance and assurance of what should be the core transport, conditions of environment and the like, as if pork was not exposed at the rain in the trees, but because the integrator has a problem to solve below. And many times, all these points, all these questions, maybe the seller does not know that the goods are traveling by sea on the maritime way. He's asking for a service and he wants a service. And the first approach is, who can perform this task for me? When I go to Dreams or Kayak and I buy a mobility service, passengers, of course, I acquire a mobility service and I know that I do it on an airway. If I have to transport concrete or cement to the Azores Islands, it's not easy. Not to imagine that it goes by sea, of course, it's maritime way. But in good rigor, he might even not know about that, if it goes by sea, if it has a transshipment port or not, and how it will get to the port. Let's imagine it's cargo in containers, and he knows that he needs to collect it here and deliver it there. That's it, period. In many cases, there are companies that from here to Italy sell a roadway service of Portuguese coastal post to a postal code in Italy. If I was a client of logistic services, I would understand. He uses the same roads that I use when I go to the snow, so it's easy for me to understand. It doesn't mean that the roadway forwarder does not have a functioning in the whole injection of the goods, the cargo, but the client doesn't know about this. Has a partner on the other side, a mirror image, and that partner takes care of the on carriage of the other side. So he doesn't know anything about the transport, and that's not a problem, because to buy a service, it's what he wants. He does not want to buy the complexity of that service. So the fact that he doesn't know anything is not a problem. He places a task and he gives proposals for that or propositions for that task. Any client, any serious client, I would say, it debates price. And to debate, for those who discuss price, is to sell complexity. This, in fact, it's a dramatic theme, because the first level of complexity is if the forward says, well, but I need to hire a roadway company and then I have to contract to the shipping agent for a part of the journey that goes by sea, and the client asks, well, this goes by sea, so he didn't even know about that. So it's between the complexity that's within it. But I need to speak with the ship owner because there is a connection here and there. Oh, you have a connection and everything, and he gets upset, of course. And at the destination also, I need to send the container to a deposit that is, I don't know where. So The complexity is being transferred into the client, so it gets tricky. The client is lowering the price and is justifying the complexity of the service itself. Well, the client has less, question mark, but it starts to import complexity. And if things get tricky, well, please notice there are some rascals in a port that it needs to have the manifest, and then it's the roadway things get it from the deposit, but from the deposit, the shipping agent needs to tell me what's the container to collect, and then to load it. And from here on, he knows that he goes to the port. He doesn't know what port it is yet. But I would say that it's an integrator transferring complexity to the client by waves, little by little, because the client is debating and he will answer with complexity little by little. This is quite common, much more common than you'd think. And thereon, we have these ones here of the institutional perspective, because we have rates, fees, this and that, and in fact, please note and notice that the man to sell cork within a box and to take that box from here to there, he doesn't want to incorporate knowledge about all this. They want to buy a service, not the complexity of the service itself. This is the first conclusion that we need to get here. And the second conclusion is that this that you see here, that I call an architecture of services, it's a tree upside down, imagine, in which a service, one of these balls here, that typically uses other services, but that is used upstream. And this is tricky when we are studying an architecture to a solution specifically, because for the service of deep sea there are competitive offers and options. So forwarders many times have some stages or different distances with the conditions of each one of the different stages, deciding that in that stage of the flow, what is one that's more convenient to them. So this is a world full of optimization. It's trade-offs, analyzing trade-offs, but this architecture, this is the way that things go today. So of course that companies protect themselves from this. Even companies of the layer of logistics by placing patterns in the offer. They have catalogs of services that use to show options as flavors for the clients. But many times this is sold in order to justify a price, right? And so, in good rigor, because we hear people in their speech, they simply don't want this. The exhibition of what they want, I will show you later. This is a reality. All these services have complex. I would say that the platforms, they have 4 types. In the Portuguese case, in the institutional context, we have 2 platforms that are important. One of them is the Customs Authority platform, is the SDS, the Summary Relation System, which is the platform of the Customs, which is a national platform, and a platform with a function of maritime administration that is divided between the Institute of Mobility and Transports and DGRM that holds and supports a safety net on the national level, on the member state Portugal, but also the coastal system of VTS, Vessel Traffic Services, right? That monitor and control traffic at sea, the ocean. Then on the local level, we have two realities. One that is here, it's targeted to the concept of port single window, which is the PSW, where we present the declarative acts that will later interact with the institutional layer, of course, that foster those acts in order that the different institutions and authorities of public administration can perform their mission, if they do or not. I'll rest here about this subject. And the port itself has another concept, which is the port community system concept. It's a concept that gathers within the port single window part in accordance with the vision that IMO, Inter-Asian Maritime Organization, has regarding this subject. Because if we were to see documentation from other organizations, as for example, European Association of Port Community Systems, in fact, we will have another vision. The core is different. IMO, it's a place that it's not efficient enough and effective, but it's quite democratic from the point of view of involving all the activities, debating things. The port community system, I would say that above or on top of the declarative acts, we have the services provided by the port, even if it's private or public. These are the ports that the services that the port provides. So the port single window and with some functions of port community system are exactly that. It gathers functions, tasks that are here regarding declarative acts, but it also has different tasks and functions that are here in the area of service provision. And so functions of what is the port community system. But to be fair, it would be convenient to transform this. It's a first conclusion that I would like to highlight here. A port should be seen as an integrated service. Because if it's simple to interact with a port, that port will have a lot of business, of course. If it's tricky because you need to go here and there to do this and that in a very complicated way, the port will not be attractive. There is a lot to do. Any of you gentlemen who are here know about the reality, and you know that we have a long way to go. So I would say that the unemployment rate that we have here is not justifiable at all. There is a lot to do. For example, here in Leixões, despite being effectively a best practice case, we still lack a platform above all the systems or on top of all the systems of the port. And that platform Why is it important? Because it collapses the complexity for those who are using the port. Of course, we need to deal with governance questions, even from the private perspective. For example, the terminal operator needs to accept that there is something related with its client, right? And already accepted it. So, in some way, the transformation process, I say that it's never done in Mother's world. The transformation process is always happening. The way of forming business and concluding business is always evolving, sometimes slower, other times quicker and faster, but this has nothing to do with technology. This has to do of finding synergy that allow to work the sensitivities in order to be able to create understandings to do things. For example, for roadway, we already did that work here in Leixões. For roadway, a roadway company that brings a container to Leixões has a relation point. And in that point, it takes care of everything that will do here to deliver and everything that does here to collect. Everything is made here at the port. The exit, it's just a simple verification, a simple control, nothing more than this. And so, this one-stop shop perspective is already done. Well, but I have a surprise, it's not. Only part of it is done. We need to go to more evolved stages when a shipping agent or a ship owner positions in our Leixões hinterland sets of empty containers because he predicts there will be an export movement, and so it positions the empty logistics, positions a set of containers here. Well, the shipping agent that's representing him will contract 6, 7, 8 companies of roadway transport. Many of them are sometimes the driver and the manager, that's his wife, that's at home, that's enough. And he knows what he needs to do here, knows everything, knows that he'll be here to pick up that set. Why does he have to be received here at the door? He can come through a blue lane as long as the system of the port knows that he's qualified for that movement. And he comes here empty, he loads the container, it's filmed, then he goes on its way. And this is important with this situation in times of crisis that we have been living since '08. Roadway companies, if they had a dysfunctional perspective before '07, I would say before '08, because in '07 they were still in the stage of becoming robust of this system, the system that exists today. So they would do 1, 2 services a day, and now they have 3, 4 services per day. And if they wouldn't, the company would have closed. And with the social cost that's very high, not only the cost of that family, the social cost for them to be unemployed. You see? So there is a lot of public interest, and that's because of that public interest that justifies that these investments are made on the public things to create a context in order for the economy to develop itself, and then the economy will send back to the public perspective respective resources in order to have funds to reinvest. This is a perfect world. We all know off the record that in fact we are paying taxes to pay interest rates or venture money. It's not smart money, it's venture money. Whenever this work has already been made on the roadway here in Leixões, is producing on the terrain benefits that are recognized, but we can do a lot more. We have more innovation cycles working to improve what's there. If we stop innovating, we will stall. We lose capacity of transferring value to clients, and so we lose competitiveness.
Let's talk now about something a little more theoretical. I have tried to put here in this triangle, the logistics triangle, somehow in the vortexes, the three variables of the market, the supply, demand, and the space, the distance, the space. I think it is space. Offer and demand, supply and demand are the laws of supply and demand. Everybody knows about this. But in combination with globalization, this space becomes relevant. And it is necessary. This is not just a relation between the seller and the buyer. Logistics needs to act incorporating value on the product, and the essential value that it has is to put commodities in their destiny. There are various roles here, and these roles, by the way, are generally, we call them actors. They are actors in the logistics world. They are actors. These actors are typified into 4 great groups, and this was a typification, an initiative that has now finished, and we have participated in it. It was carried out by several institutions and companies. The initiatives, the report called Fright. Maybe you don't remember it, but for example, IATA, institution that internationally regulates air traffic. IATA has agents in every country, in almost every country. Ours is in Madrid, our agent, and they knock on companies' doors to put in place the airway electronic that came from this Fright initiative, and the things are being built now. Basically, we now have as actors the client of the logistics services client, and he is somehow, or sometimes the buyer and others the seller. And they have the main share, the lion's share of benefits of the value. The value belongs to them, to be rigorous, but it is not, because they incorporate logistics, and logistics is expensive. It is an area. This area, LSP, it includes LSP, TNM, and TR. This area has a value that is allocated to logistics, and it is divided into these 3 layers. These logistics services provider, then 2 other layers with differences regardless of who the actors are, and they have significant differences, these layers, especially in the models that are most evolved in the market. We're talking about the transport network manager. He manages the infrastructure, the manager of the infrastructure. This is arguable, but the port authority here at Les Changes can be called the network manager. The container terminal is the provider, and he does this as a public servant, and a service that is regulated by the network manager. In other cases, the process is different. For example, Brisa, Portuguese Highways, is a provider, or is he a network manager? Who is the regulator? Is it Autostradas Portugal, Portuguese infrastructures? Things are put into perspective in different ways. The functions, the conceptions, all these actors are different in different situations. But the roles that are performed, regardless of who performs them, is the same. And then we have the regulator. In the road system, we have one regulator. In the tax system, we have another regulator. Who is the network manager in these situations? There is none in this authority institution. Who is the customs broker? Who is he, the customs broker? Is he a service provider, or is he the person in the field, of the regulator? Legally speaking, the customs broker is an agent from customs. He is an employee, a servant from customs, and what he says must be accepted by the client. To understand, there are situations that we may analyze them, but we have no time to do it thoroughly. But I want to leave some ideas. These are the four main roles in which the world of logistics is divided, and the world of the clients of logistics. And this freight initiative I have referred, it is an initiative that in some way has structured this. Let me go back one slide to talk to you about another problem. And I think Commandant Cunha has mentioned before. When you analyze this in practice, this is Les Changes port. There you have Sines, the port of Sines, and then Singapore. When we put this into practice, communication phenomena among all these participants are chaotic. They are actually chaotic. Technologically speaking, everything might be in place, but we communicate with one in one format and with another format, and there is one-to-one relations that must be automatized. Otherwise, things are worse, get worse. We have translation phenomena in between, and translation is a barrier that does not allow the river to flow. To provide you with a metaphor, stopping the river from flowing. When you have to play the piano in a computer to translate something from one format to another, what you are inserting into the communication flow, what we are inserting is delay. And there is a third conclusion I would like to discuss with you, and it is this. I am sure you have stumbled across or came across statements such as, what does the road carrier passes on to the maritime carrier, and this one to the road carrier on the other side. No, this does not happen like this. This is a mistake that we have taken a long time to understand, and we have not disseminated enough. Physically speaking, the truck goes to the depot, and from then to the cargo place, and from then to the terminal. The terminal parks the truck. Then it gives it to the feeder, for the who then takes it to transshipment port to the leg-on carriers. Let's simplify this. To the unloading place, and from the unloading place, the equipment is delivered back to the depot, and from the depot, and on the depot, the road service ends. All these limit points of transfer of services, what we find are procedures of cargo transfer. There is no exchange of information, of relevant information for the door-to-door flow. At this point, when the container is delivered in the terminal, the company receives a confirmation that it has delivered it. And that is part of the procedure. And the road company gives warning to its hirer until the information rises and then goes back down in this tree of services. These contractual relations regulate or dictate how information flows, and it's not from one link to another. It goes up in this tree, and from this it climbs another level until it comes to a point when it comes down again. Information does not move physically, but it goes up and down in this tree of services. And a lot of people in this sector does not know that. And until they understand it, they don't know how to act. This is a very important aspect as well. Let us go back now to the following slide. I just wanted to refer this question. These transactions are regulated by the so-called Incoterms, and Incoterms are typified contracts. They are not transport contracts. They are buying and selling contracts. Contracts that regulate the transport conditions and responsibilities. The World Commerce Organization regulates Incoterms, WCO, and the last updating is from 2010, if I'm not mistaken. In fact, this is quite important because door-to-door serves other purposes as well. If I am selling cost insurance and freight, CIO, my door-to-door is that, to the port. And then the other person has the problem. CIO. This is not just with door-to-door. Door-to-door is what I choose it to be. For example, I am an exporter, and I may have different door-to-doors to sell it from departure to destination, from the factory to the place where I have TrainMoS, the company, for example, receives the production, picks it up at the factory, and then puts it in their logistics storehouses, the production, I mean, and then receives delivery orders from their own warehouses. This is a different type of door-to-door. So when we talk about door-to-door, we are not referring to a theory, something that is theoretical or that exists in the twilight zone. We're talking about concrete things. They are concepts that are then put into practice, but they must be understood. The 2010 Incoterms, you just have to Google them to get them, and you will find all the graphs that you want. Basically, there are different modalities. You have the DDP and the EXV at the extremes, and there was also the DDU, duty unpaid, which is quite often more interesting than this. The door-to-door is not necessarily the DDP. If it is more interesting in tax terms, and that happens often, don't try and sell DDP because it's not interesting. So there are reasons that reason does not know about. Basically, in blue, you have the responsibility in all these acts. The responsibility marked in blue, the responsibility is of the seller, the person who sells, and in red, the responsibility of the buyer. What I mentioned before regarding the gross domestic product is visible here. This logistic costs money, sometimes more than the product itself. And so it is quite different not to invoice anything to invoicing all of this. And so we do not invoice it. And the GDP is the sum of the income of all the companies, a measure of economic activity of a country. So it is a lot. And of course, we want it to be in our favor. But you may check this online. Another interesting concept it is so interesting that a Portuguese cartooner has drawn this cartoon. In most cases, when you talk about motorways of the sea, the highways, the maritime highways, you imagine ships speeding across maritime lanes. They are flags, the motorways of the sea. They are a flag that has nothing to do with services to the ship. It has to do with services to the cargo, because it is a concept that aims at, well, at first, initially, European policy wanted to hinder the growth of transport, but now it aims at fighting road transport. At a point in between these two extremes, we'll find reason. Well, you know that road transport must be combined with maritime and railway transport as well, and one does not make sense without the other, and there's no need to penalize road transport. Road transport has alternatives in terms of environmental efficiency, conditions that are more beneficial, but in business, a combination of maritime and road transport and rail transport, it does not make sense to penalize road transport, But going back now, the common citizen understands that motorways of the seas are services to the ship, but they are services to cargo in a door-to-door logic. Because services to cargo have to have competitive prices to provide services door to door, services integrated, services to the cargo, not to the ship. And this is the strategy to fight road transport by road, to reach a new balance between a past and the present with many roads but good ports and good railway lines, and preparation to reach a different market share. It's not the other's fault. We must do our best. Well, in fact, motorways of the sea, we're not talking about port investment in ports. That's an action within a strategy. We are not referring to the importance of a certain terminal or port. We're talking about services to the cargo. That is what real economy needs. That is what real economy needs. Real economy, the exporter, wants logistics to be as demanded as he has in his daily business. And so they want predictability. They don't want to hear about complexity. They want effective services, reliable services. This is what they want, services to the cargo. And this is an aspect of motorways of the sea that today we forget about. Is we are only thinking about ourselves and that we are the most important, but we are not. Now, what is important is how much money we have to finance our activities. No, that is wrong. We cannot distract ourselves from this reality. Please note another aspect. We have to be conscious that the logistics services network, when we talk about logistics services network, we're not talking about a geo-referentiated network, because that is infrastructure, all locals or local businesses or local services, localized in space, in some spaces. What we're talking about is the network of service providers. I can be here providing a service to China or to São Paulo or to Fortaleza in Brazil. It is a network of service providers. Then I will tell you something interesting about it, if I don't forget. I have so many to tell. Basically, just to carry cargo from A to B in this network of logistics services, we don't have logistics chains. We have chains that formalize options. The network itself is a market, and that market gives you competitive solutions. Solutions provided to those who want to buy. And there are several options for the same service. Let us suppose that we have these three as interesting options. This one goes to Hamburg in Germany, up there in the slide. Then you have Rotterdam or something below there, somewhere in France, Bordeaux. We have an interesting aspect here. Between A and B, there are several solutions in the network, and each of these solutions is a chain. That is the concept of chain. And so the company Silva Limitada, a Portuguese company selling a product to Fritz GmbH, it is selling a product. Let us suppose that Mr. Silva here wants to incorporate all the logistics The network offers three of many possible solutions. In the market, no forwarder will give you only one solution unless they don't like the client. But they all provide you with options, even if they have to ask other forwarders. But these three look interesting. As efficient as l'échange, the node of the network is, as efficient as it is, it may have several arms, but it's privileged arms, but we'll talk about them later. For example, if he doesn't have this service in yellow, basically a direct shuttle to destination, of course, a feeder that stops at every port will not be able to compete with road transport. No, I'm sure it won't be able to compete with a road solution. As efficient as the node may be, the efficiency is also dependent on exterior causes. If the node has, for example, a group of services that is interesting and competitive, it may not have them. To invest in a lot of infrastructure in the node is justified if there is investment in the services that the node makes available in its catalog. The case of l'échange, for example, we transfer door-to-door to 180 countries. It is interesting. Is it efficient? It depends. On some cases it is, on others it is not. That's natural. But the attention to services that are available to clients. Let me give you an example. I'm sorry to be referring to brands and companies of the real world, but in this, it is sometimes interesting to make it concrete. In the old times, 8 years ago, goods that came to our hinterland from the Far East typically came not only to our hinterland, even to Italy, to Genoa. It went to Rotterdam and went by rail to Italy, to Liguria in Italy. There are phenomena of extreme inefficient, and the ship owner is the one who placed ships in Sines, and they go through the feeders up sea, and others of deep sea go to Antwerp in this case, and feeders come down, and some of them navigate in the gray areas in between. The distance, the time of traffic between the Far East and our hinterland, because it comes from Sines, and the feeder begins at Sines, has decreased in 14 days. You see? It decreased 14 days in transit with a stock moving is a lot of money, means a lot of money. So there's always capacity to innovate the services of the infrastructures. And these good ideas are the ones that generate value. But of course the service is cheaper. Is it? I don't know. I don't know. It depends on competitors. I'm going to draw a scheme on the board now. Yeah. Sorry for all those who are not here in the room. There is an economist who engineers know, Samuelson, Mr. Samuelson, and he has drawn many conclusions Engineers know him well because Samuelson is our study book, our textbook recommended for us engineers, people who make a lot of count. In fact, when someone is on the market, he's a market leader, and it produces by this price that we see and sells at that price. If I come to the market with a disruptive proposition and my production cost is much below, why am I going to sell at this price? If I can sell at a slightly above the production price of my competitor, the leader of the market. Samuelson concluded that market price is the price of the leader company that has the worst conditions but is in the market. Typically, when there is a disruptive phenomena that lowers production costs for disruptive levels, there is a period following this moment in which who has carried out this innovation is incorporating all this volume of benefit, of gain, until it reaches, and apparently who is on the market is apparently only has a very small profit margin. But if the second company who has introduced this innovation, if it lowers its price, if the market will fall on it. Does it have capacity to respond to the market? It has to create that capacity. But at some point, but to create capacity, you must invest. And invest brings cost, investment cost. And so what do we do? Okay, I'm not going to sell at this cost, but at slightly higher cost. But they have to be prepared to cope with the day after. Everybody goes to that company. In logistics buying, if no one will buy at a higher price. Typically speaking, companies begin by incorporating this benefit here. And with this benefit, they invest in creating reliability, bringing reliability to the service and capacity. And of course, they will destroy the other company on the market. This was one of the readings by Professor Samuelson about these cyclic behaviors of the market. Well, now, it's not enough to be efficient individually. This is the conclusion of the slide. You have to be efficient collectively. The client of logistics services wants a collective efficiency. He demands collective efficiency. Which chain in the network is more efficient, collectively speaking? Which one? We don't know. We can be the best company, but our partners are dreadful, and our environment is not good, and so our efficiency is lost because it is not utilized, because collectively the solution is not attractive, and it has to be attractive collectively speaking. And this is a conclusion that is very relevant, because when people forget about this, they end up investing, crashing prices, And it would be more interesting if they invested outwards and found business relations that would allow that collaboratively they would provide services that were in fact collectively efficient. Another concept I wanted to pass on to you, and we're still on concept. The difference between private networks and public networks of logistics services. Private logistics services networks are typically global operators. When we're talking about door-to-door, those who could give as example are DHL, TNT, FedEx, UPS, and many others. CTT Express is not, but they have partners, relations. We have a subsidiary of FedEx in Portugal. There's another one in Angola. Through partners, private partners, they are networks that have no competitors, internally speaking. If the client wants a FedEx solution and he wants competitors, he needs to ask DHL and UPS for solutions because the FedEx network has no competitors. What they have are collaborators horizontally and vertically to manage capacity at different levels of the service. It is not strange that a driver from CTT Express comes and delivers to FedEx, even though FedEx in Portugal has another partner. It is a question of collaboration, horizontal collaboration, not vertical. But to manage, and that exists to manage capacity issues. A public network is not public because it is connected with public institutions. It's called public because there are competitors within the network. It is a space, a market, in which there are several service providers for the same task, for the same delivery, several offers for the same service. So it is, in fact, a public network. What it doesn't have are formal solutions, as DHL, for example, has. Globally speaking, DHL has global solutions, doesn't it? If we want to send something to Sri Lanka, I have nothing to worry about. I go to a place, receive the proposal, the proposition, I decide upon it, contract, hire, receive the token, that goes with the provision of the service, and it's done. But why? Because DHL has critical mass to put up a system like this globally, at a global level. What other companies do have that capacity? Very few. But the logistics service networks has large, medium, and micro companies, global, national, Iberian companies, many types of options. And in fact, apparently, the formalization of concepts prevent solutions to be competitive, to insert in this public network realities from other sectors. For example, the express mail sector, that is not a very big network, a network with a lot of capacity. So, do not confuse public network with public institutions. This has to do with competition. Of course, public networks have issues of extreme complexity. Standardization, they don't have it. They do have an excess of standardization. And when they apply the standards, they have an excessive specification. There's a lot to be done in this area. One of the things I referred before is that it is LBS, what I was going to talk to you about. What is a port? A port is a service, a localized service. Even in the world of intelligent transport system, ITS, as road engineering, navigation systems, road nodes, traffic control, interaction between cars and ITS, intelligent transport. There are EU directives on it. There are international directives about it. We have a solution for Portugal. There's one for France, England. There are ITS everywhere. They are directed to mobility issues, not to logistics issues, because for companies, that's the concept. The market is much more attractive. It is new and much more attractive. And so they put in practice this concept of location-based services that are localized in terms of GPS. A logistics platform is there. It has its area of influence. The gravitational services that gravitate around it. The port is a node. It is there. A railroad or a motorway is the route that connects us and is still a localized service, which is sometimes charged through tolls. So when we put a service in the terrain, we use connections and nodes through these LBS services, location-based services. And even more, who is, for the trailer, who is the port? Is it the port authority, the containers? No, it is the ship owner. The ship owner through its agent, because the price that the ship owner provides is the price that includes the maritime leg and the costs in charge at the both extremes. Because meantime, he has made deals with the port communities. And so, in fact, for the trade, it is the ship owners or agents who sell the port. And so the center of the port is not as big as some say it is.
However, these are main nodes in that network. Finally, I would like to finish trends. Despite many of them I already gave you, I have a lot of tendencies, which is knowledge and non-acquired trends yet. So, but there are acquired trends nonetheless. And on those trends, we have the sun is not our friend at this time, and so the screen is not visible enough. So the extended gateways are typically that exist in deep sea terminals that have second line platforms, and that in fact when they sell a service, the THCs, they sell THCs, for example, in Rotterdam, in ICT, they sell them in Hamburg, in Berlin, in Nuremberg, in Liège. They have THCs for all these locations. And they have these routes, main routes, that allow even for the port of Rotterdam to have a presence on those spaces. In fact, it's not enough to say that I have already a qualified service. Services are optimized, are squeezed in order to be competitive. This is preparation work with all this context, not by accident, because if we work business relations in order to formalize and optimize routes, for example, in Portugal, we have, for example, Siemens with CP Cargo and with MSC, several terminals, second line terminals. One of them is the station of Leixões, as you well know. Well, me myself, my belly button may not be in love with this, but I need to be competitive. No one will buy from me if it's cheaper to go by railway there. So, do you agree? It's innovation. And so, there is a process, integration, and orchestration of technology also associated with these routes to optimize these routes. So these are some specific and already defined concepts. But for the next 2.5 years, we will work this connect Leixões to second line terminals. And why? Did you ever thought? Why? Ever think about it? Leixões is a port. It has an unlimited capacity to grow, of course. It can grow into the sea, but with investment of millions, right? So how can we come from the situation in which we are now? We already been able to overcome the limits that we had when we reached that level to blow up. So no more possibilities of growing up. Okay, another level and another level. This happened a lot in the last few years because those who write these statements are looking at the business in a geometric perspective. So if we are innovating our processes, if we optimize the business itself, we are always breaking records, right? Of course, this is clear. The extended gateways are important for us because despite that physically we have problems, no drama there, but we have solutions also. If we didn't, that would be the truth. Well, for example, goods who are unloaded here need to exit quickly to a second line terminal near to the final customer, final client. It doesn't need to be here. The goods that come to the second line terminal only comes to the port when it's to be loaded, but it needs to be controlled because of the reliability of ship operations. See? So the port, it's not a place where the cargo arrives, stops, and keeps waiting for someone to pick it up and to collect it. This is not the way. So this is a place of passage and a temporary placement for cargo. I was impressed with recent happenings. Brazil, for example, is one of the situations that has impressed me. In Brazil, the business model, the business plan of container terminals is to sell sharing spots. And why? Because the relations, the institutional relations, and even business relations are difficult there. A container from our low wine gets there and waits for a whole month in the terminal at least. And so in this context, what do they sell? They sell parking space, not effectiveness and efficiency. And so they parking and so much parking that they don't need to be effective. But that is a problem that arises from the individual interest of that operator in that terminal. The collective interest is not that, of course. And this has an impact in the real world. I will give you a very interesting example. I think it was near Rio de Janeiro. At the dinner, and on the table we had a bottle of wine that was not in good condition, and the man excused himself, and it said that in every 5 bottles that are imported, 2 of them are rejected immediately. Of the 3, 2 of them are protested, and the other, we don't know. So I can only sell 1 or 2 of the 6 that I buy. But because of this, what happens, Argentinian wine and from Peru has a bigger penetration, is winning market share instead of the wine that travels by sea. This has an impact in the real world. So an example of a different situation. In Liverpool, the Liverpool port that has a lot of space, the deposit for scrap, I will never see something bigger in my life. They sell a lot of scrap because the industrial revolution started there, so they have a lot of scrap, a lot of space also. They were building a deep sea terminal, and as innocent as I was, I asked, where's the park for containers? Because the container park was similar to the south one that we have here for deep sea ships, 60 meters. That was confusing to me because the cargo that gets here is doing nothing at the terminal. Why is the cargo here? It needs to get out of here fast. The cell efficiency, that's it, not parking. But this thing depends on situations. The problem when we do not innovate, because innovating is creating value, and we create value to return value to the client. This is important. It's to be on your side. We made the investments. We need to have an income on that investment. So the extended gateways for Leixões increases extraordinarily the capacity. There is no cost of geometric capacity because we have no geometry. Physically, we have no geometry for it. And so they say, well, we will have no more capacity. Yes, this will happen, so we need to innovate. Another concept here that's very important is the synchromodality. This has to do with an integrated management of the network. This is being tested with pilot projects. It's not only of a chain, of a single route, it's of the network itself. It's the synchromodality of the network, the management of the offer and demand in the network itself. This is an important aspect. And there is something that's even more interesting, which is the physical internet. Physical internet, it's our point where we'll stop to have some coffee. I will turn out the lights there because it's terrible for you to be able to show you the video. But physical internet is a concept of using the principles of internet in logistic networks. So when we send an email to someone, we are aware that the data packages that we send, that's sent by data packages, and sometimes part goes by one network and the other by the other arm of the network. So one on one side or other on the other. So it's all deconstructed and then constructed again at the destination. So the principle is that within the network nodes, they are intelligent enough for the next step and what to do next. So the idea is to transform logistics in a commodity. And internet is a commodity for us also. We pay for the access that includes 5 giga, for example, of the internet. That's a commodity. I don't need to understand or manage if this goes to India or if the point between networks sits in Lisbon or Madrid or I don't care where. I don't want to know. And please notice that the express networks, it's almost the same thing. We only know that something is wrong when the ball comes here and there. And I ordered a book, for example, in which it went to Madrid. I didn't know it would go to Madrid, but then it should come to the airport of the Porto. And I said, well, it's almost here. And then it got back to Madrid by mistake. And I then understood that something went wrong, but well, it got here eventually. But it allowed that for me to have the perception of those movements, because when it came here, to be delivered at the final destination, which is the next step, and then it went back. There was something there that went wrong, but I don't know. I'm buying a commodity, and so the great question here of using logistics as a commodity has to do with governance and compensation. Who is providing services and what's the criteria to use that operator and not the other? You see? So this is something tricky. And so I would say this is a trend with long-term results, but it's disruptive at the same time. I have a small video here. Everything is on, I think, and this video explains exactly that, and you can at home see this with more thoroughly. Desligou? Não está ligado. This is interesting, right? But we have the same problem. This is possible to transform. We have all these logistics in a commodity that is injected and it's paid by ton times mile or kilometer. But why kilometers? That's not. I did not decide that. I wanted to go that way because it was shorter. We need to have criteria, right? So you understand. This is a subject that it's still a little bit complicated, but it's very interesting. They added here an aspect that I didn't spoke about today yet. It's sustainability. Let's return to sustainability. Port of Leixões was the first European port to perform a sustainability report for the port itself, and with results strange that were strange because they were unknown, and this brought some surprise because on average the environmental cost of the port is 290 kilograms of CO2 by ton of moved cargo, almost a third of the weight of the transactionable assets. Just because it comes here has 294 kilograms of CO2 by ton, because it's a surprise. And so we measured it. My Galfrota card, it's a card for fuel, always as its weight also because it's a cost for the ports. Of course, that pollution is not generated here. It's in Carregado, in other parts. It depends on the energy, on a percentage. All of this is complicated. It depends on the patterns of buying of energy. But it's not produced here because the ports would drown in all this pollution with the millions of tons that we move. If a third of this corresponds to CO2, we could not live here at all. But if there is a sustainability report, company to company, B2B, that allows to quantify how does this services cost environmentally when we distance ourselves from that company, when someone asks for a proposition, by consolidation in the service area, we know how much it will cost environmentally. And the truck did not went to the road yet, and we know how much it costs regarding the environment. This subject was placed by us in Brussels in the previous project, and we are working on it now. And it is interesting. And it's interesting why? Because I never forget that this training action, it's financed by Marco Polo. And that manages also EcoBonus. It's related, right? Okay, right. Sure. But why does it not exist anymore? Because Brussels did not believe in us. They did not believe in us that it would be possible to find formula to measure what happens. It's not a study that states that I will remove things from the road to put I don't know where and no one is going to get there and check. Everyone questions the study. When someone makes a decision of following a certain chain and not another one, the options that are put at the availability of those who decide can decide if it goes by this one, it has an eco bonus, that one doesn't, and that one should pay an environmental tax. So about tax charging, these matters of tax charging and subsidies attribution, like an eco bonus, for example, could be managed platforms that would incorporate this offer for trade. Brussels did not believe in it, and it was a success. This is recognized today. Even the people from the Commission recognize that eco-bonus are a success case. They are trying to bring back to life something connected with this reality, to reverse this situation, but we have not been addressed yet. But we will try to sit Brussels down and show them the results of the projects that we are monitoring and the capacity of empowering the management of EcoBonus and solutions also, because today EcoBonus, I can have in an accredited and certified way to have a fee that supports the business of the platform instead of charging it to the client on the cost by transaction fee. So there are some trade-offs that need to be studied and analyzed, tricky governance questions that need to be studied. And it's how much does that service cost door to door? It's the sum of the environmental impact that it's consolidated through the services that compose them and assemble it themselves. And this is the way of thinking, not the other. Of course, then you have the rascals. When they do something that wants to win money with it, it's not easy. An environmental impact report, it's not easy. Volkswagen issue, for example, maybe there is some fraud in it even. This cannot be proved. It's not proved yet, so we need to have some evidence of it. But the position is at the table. It's been debated. Why? Because there are responsibilities. For example, Europe is training environmental engineers on large numbers. What are they doing? Are they doing environmental impact studies on companies? We have the teaching, sending experts in a subject into the society, and the society simply doesn't apply this knowledge. This is all backwards and upside down, but all of this has logic and benefits that overcome our sector, and most of them are of public interest. There are responsibilities in saying, my service costs exactly this. It states that it needs to have some evidence on the responsibility and on the certification. Only these people can place services here. This has to do with governance. Who can publish services in this logic? With the attribution of EcoBonus, this has to do with governance. This needs to be debated, but we can debate them tomorrow, or we can debate them 10 years from now. That was just a small remark that I wanted to bring here. The environmental issue, we are not addressing them, although because a problem is solvable. And after solving that problem and after knowing what the problem is, there are people that want to sell us services to solve that problem. But we need to understand that we have a problem. We need to see that we have a problem. And while we don't understand that we have a problem, we can't solve it. We will have coffee break now. We are 12 minutes late, but we started a little bit with a little bit of delay, and we will return here. I don't know if there is any questions for those who are abroad and online. Are they alive? This is a legitimate question, right? Okay, so they can have some coffee. If they were here, they would have a glass of port, wine, but these virtual realities also have their characteristics. Well, I don't know, it depends on you. 15 minutes? 15 minutes? Okay, so see you soon.